So welcome back to seeing me for one models updated, but I have a few important announcements to make, and they're very big ones. First things first, the most important thing is I something came up at my recent doctor's appointment, and it's not looking good. Now, I'm not in any immediate messy situation, but what I am dealing with right now is like when I went to my endocrinologist in July, they had to check my pulse several times to be sure because it was so high and my blood pressure was as well. And then like last week, this past Monday, I went into a different one of my doctors. He took my blood pressure and heart rate, and they were elevated. So I've been not very well physically for the past 2 months or more. Like I was fine back in like April, I was fine. And then somehow at the start of summer, something really went badly. Though I can say that my sleep was kind of bad on the days it happened. So that's a factor. But at the same time, I normally have a higher pulse to begin with, but for it to be off the charts when I've before had bad sleep and gotten an appointment, it's kind of bad. And not to mention, all sides of my family have heart issues. So, like, I'm worried about meeting the Grim Reaper at this point. They're not in any immediate risk, but it's more, yeah, I don't know what to say about this. But if I somehow am totally off the internet for a very long time, please assume something bad has happened and I just wasn't able to tell anyone. The other thing to keep in mind is that some might call what happened kind of ironic, given that this summer I've not been happy. I feel like I've had nothing but misfortune because the reason I didn't do any streams or whatever is for the entire month of July, I was without a stable computer. The computer I did have, well, it had a buggy USB bus, and this webcam was damaged. Like the sensor was either totally toast, or what it was doing was the webcam on this computer, not the one I'm on, but on that computer, it had a issue where there'd be red streaks in the video signal. This is probably from computer damage or whatever, but both computers only lasted really like around about a year. The one that needed repair this time around only lasted less than a year before its SSD had to be replaced for warranty. But my computer had to be, but the computer, but the other computer lasted about 1.5 years. So yeah, don't buy Lenovo. But the problem that is the problem here, and also it's the same thing SSD, so ouch. But not to mention the thumb drive I use for data recovery for the drive cloning wasn't happy either. So like, and I'm worried about which SD card brand will I buy that won't fail really quickly. It's annoying. I feel like storage media has gotten worse these days, and I don't know what to do about it. But there's a lot to say about that. Anyhow, another important factor is that so I had my computer, and so I couldn't do any of the creative things I wanted to. So I took up reading fan fiction a lot, and well, using what little computer access I could manage, like nothing too demanding or something, to do things I cared about. Or, but it was kind of unfortunate knowing I might not have the same computer, but I did. It's just kind of, it's been a circus for me these days. And having my computer go out, like all the things I wanted to do this one summer, I could do stuff. I can't do it now. Oh, and I only have 2 weeks left before I have some real life commitments to take care of. So it's not like I'll be gone from uploading or anything like that. But the issue is I'm probably going to be on hiatus again unless I have something really important and I have the energy to, you know, get it dealt with. Like there's a lot to it that I need to deal with. But the other issue I'm having is that on top of all of the like I've messed with my schedule, but well, I think I've under the circumstances where, put simply, the people I'm with, who I'm residing with, are not very nice people, and I don't really have a way out. And unfortunately, this has absolutely kind of made me not much of a happy person, and I've kind of, I've had a lot to say about my situation, and none of it is good. And on top of that, it's just kind of it's to the point of it's an unhealthy level for sure. And unfortunately, I've come even more closer to this point of total collapse. Even actually, I said a lot of, like, and I made it clear that, like, the people who thought such a case was happening 2 years ago when it wasn't are now responsible for it getting bad. Where instead of reacting with empathy to someone who clearly needs someone to listen, you shun this person instead for using the vent channel as intended. That's kind of tacky. And honestly, the person chose to be a cop, so I don't have sympathy for that person. But well, I used to back when before I knew what they were up to. But well, that's in the past now. Anyhow, I think my other problem is, so starting around late May, the one community I was in it for a long while, but it only started like going back to it recently after an exit from a different community. Well, somebody posted some rage bait in there that they weren't supposed to post, and I reacted to it in a very, well, let me just put it this way. I it was unfortunate. Like, I was just I was kind of like, it just felt like I was dealing with, like what they were saying scared me. So I, of course, was kind of talked about some of my very vocal stances on that particular bit of bait, because I was like saying, hey, I mean, the people who made it happen in the first place kind of, I said some stuff that was rather heartless, I would suppose, though I don't, though, you know, it's also sort of a case of an eye for an eye type of thing. And I don't mean this in terms of, causing problems. It's just more like we shouldn't enable bigots with benefits, or however you go for it. Like, basically, I was, so yeah, it was about, but simply, I said that transphobes shouldn't get health care, but everyone who isn't a transphobe should get Medicare for all. I said that. Meanwhile, so basically, a whole on partisan cutting funding j- for individuals, not even like just individuals, because, and I admit it was unhealthy for me to say that, considering that I have plenty of people who fit the have a lot of health issues and are bigots in my rough family tree. So, yeah, I insulted my family, but not at that moment. And unfortunate, not that my family has been a nice family, but well, I think people didn't like just how far I was willing to talk about for, just how little regard I held for like, I have empathy, contrary to what they thought, but I at the same time, I have contempt for people who do not have empathy, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of, I'd say it balances out, but either way, my comment about, not letting bigots have help, have, everything paid for, kind of pushed people over the edge, and I got banned. And I tried to appeal, and that went nowhere. Not that there was even an appeals form. I just tried asking the mods. I was banned. Nothing. And this is, and I say that community was, I might have earned that, but the person involved spammed it to every server they were in and posted it to a server I moderate, which a server that the head owner of it, who kind of handed over the reins partially to me, sort of in their rules put in a clause saying no politics. This person tries to spread the word about, oh no, everyone's be so scared in the US type of thing. I saw that post and I was like, and when I saw that this person had posted the same thing that got me banned from that other music community I loved into a server I run, well, let me just say that my first impulse was to issue an automatic perma ban, but I didn't do that. I just made a whole new warning role because the server didn't have them. I gave them a role that is not even a strike, but it's a don't do this again role. And I chewed this person out and said, you got me banned. And I proceed, but I didn't like go into a full on tongue lashing or anything like that. I just like explained, hey, watch what you post. And I didn't even mute the person. I just, because it's a quiet server. But I basically said, hey, don't do that again. And I get your intent. And the only reason I haven't punished you more severely with regards to administration actions is because you were trying to do the right thing, but you didn't care about the mental health people in the servers. So, uh, yay for you, I guess. So that was unfortunate. But the other thing I had to deal with that's kind of sad is that sometime in July, one of the people I've known since high school, well, he kind of, for the second time, tries to, when he usually puts his disc or he and also they whenever they put their Discord accounts, but I knew this person as a binary trans man for years, but there was a situation where like about earlier in the summer they ended up doing some like hibernation on their Discord account, including during school time. Nothing of it wrong there. But I think this person did the whole standby of like this person would totally erase their profile picture and make the account seem like a dead account, and then undo it afterwards. Well, the problem is that the first time around, they kept their server up and all that. The second time around, this person does it again, but then they even for about 2 weeks detransitioned and also deleted their server completely for no reason. I don't believe you should delete your account or server unless you have a very good reason. I don't think many reasons are that other than, oh, hey, you're being eminently in a bad situation. The other thing I have a problem with is that on top of all of that, this person, I tried to, like, on the one server that wasn't deleted, that this person was still in, I tried asking, like, hey, because the account name had changed, like they used another account. But I asked if they were the same person. Like, I should have known because it was in the analysis section. But a mod changeover could have happened. Well, I asked this person's partner, who I also know from high school. Now, I never got a response from the partner at all, and still haven't even now after what was going to happen next. So what happened next is that just for asking about that, without even pinging the server owner, they banned me for just asking for the same person, only for this person to undo all of those changes about 2 weeks later. So, and and for a little bit after, when I was in a different server, I was checking, some stuff about a friend. Well, not really someone I probably know from, but like, anyways, I tried looking at this person's bio, and the bio said that this person was actually in a relationship with the person who banned me for no reason at all, other than me trying not accidentally not knowing who is who, and potentially giving their game away. I don't know. But the issue that happened here is that this person chose to, and so this in that random acquaintance's bio, I saw that this person was, in a relationship with that other person who had their own partner. But it didn't seem poly at the time. It ended up being poly when I found the information out about a few weeks later. But for a while, I thought I that the people involved, that this friend of mine from high school, one of the first people I came out to, would never be seen again unless I somehow end up in the city randomly. But even though I know and that they got their account back, but even though I know that I could still talk to them through it, I'm not going to do it until I see their partner in real life at my university, which this is I saw them in the previous university server. I don't know how that's going to go, but if it depends on what I'm going to do. So we'll see about that. And I don't even know if my schedule, we'll see. But surely someone will check the Discord when they're not vacationing, I suppose. And even then, I could probably do a ping, but that might be risky. Anyways, the point being is, so the whole situation felt like grieving. Like I felt like I had lost a loved one. Because after all, this person was one of the original found family, and we had our moments of differences, but these people welcomed me back with open arms 4 years after we had last seen each other, even though we hadn't parted on speaking terms. Because when the pandemic happened, we were parted, and I just didn't feel like interacting again because I didn't want to risk being. But 4 years later, in a server that was later found to be toxic, we reconnected, and I got the person in touch with another mutual friend. So all was well. Evidently, this person probably forgot who I was, considering that the last time I talked in their server was in 2025 for renovations. But when this person said something about what they were planning to do, I kind of just didn't want to contribute to it. So I didn't do anything about it. Albeit the reason I did so was not for the most advised of reasons, but and that's before a lot of my other things, you know. So what ended up happening? So no, but for someone who literally was one of the first people I came out to literally in their infinite wisdom choose to forget who I was, or maybe they suddenly remembered some of my lesser, some of the moments I've had that were not exactly well reasoned, either on the toxic community or when we actually knew each other in high school. I remember saying a lot of cringeworthy things, including things that I didn't know the impact of. I mean, I like even as a kid, I remember a lot of things I regret. Like there's so many of them, and like I think I some of my yapping is not very. Hmm. So as a kid, a lot of times I was, saying a lot of things that just didn't date well. Let me just put it that way. It wasn't like it was a toxic thing to say in terms of bigotry, but what it was me being like, like, though honestly, a lot of some of it was from my own family, or it was eye for an eye, but I won't but I won't defend it because I've even acknowledged it was insensitive, and yeah. But the other thing that I was unfortunately involved in doing was the unfortunate thing that I had to deal with was like, so what I had to deal with was unfortunate because see, the issue I had was that, so yeah, no, I mean, so to this friend of mine, I had, compared them to a character who I felt reminded me of them, but the unfortunate part about that was that the comparison would only have matched the detransition era of this person, which that was not the case at the time. So I unfortunately sort of failed on that front. And but this person completely forgot about it, and um or did they forget about it? I'm not sure of that, but I don't think I if they got back to the original account, I don't think they would have done anything unless that like so who knows. Or there could have been a huge hacking attempt that would, ban people because I've seen hackers who are server admins do really bad things. You know, I don't know what it is, but I'm not for another 2 weeks. I'm not going to know. Well, more like 3 weeks, but I'm not going to know until then. So we'll see about that. I also tried applying for a job, but unfortunately, my university's job application form system, they redid it, and they deleted my resume, and now they have to clear every resume you upload. And I cleared it before certain opportunities came up, but then they were already gone by the time it cleared, and I'm going to be bringing that up with them this time 2 weeks from now, practically. And the thing with that is, so I'm going to have to go, say, hey, your system really caused me problems in a field where I need experience to not have to look as hard, especially considering some of the issues I've with how the pandemic affected my CompTIA stuff. Anyways, the point being is I'm not in a very good so like nothing but misfortune. So you got the sadness, you have the computer issues that derail a whole VCAT event I wanted to go to. Then we got the Pride stuff, and I didn't care about virality because it's paid for. I had a huge bit of a drama situation with a Japanese item proxy service, and well, and so it was sort of doing what I did in terms of choosing the listing I did was doing I was right and wrong at the same time, but I had no way to know that for another 2 months. But on to bigger announcements. So in the time I've had left for creative stuff that when I've not been fatigued, well, I've been working on sound fonts. And well, the Showbox sound font, like I added another patch to it that could have existed randomly. And now I'm currently stuck in the loop of trying to, constantly think of things to add to the metadata now that I'm not bound by file size because I lost the convenient file size by adding an extra thing. I also fixed the tuning for a lot of samples. It was well, not a lot, but like it's trying to make it more and more concert pitch without actually changing the notes directly. It's fascinating tricks I use regarding semitones, but yeah, no, I wanted to make it as good as possible, and I used the automatic correction feature to tune. But put simply, I've never been like so. Tyroland is updated, but the main announcement is that for all intents and purposes, I have finished Tyroland, the Roland JB1010, the Yamaha Tyros 4 hybrid sound font I made. I made that sound font 6 years ago. Well, almost. It'll be 6 years ago in 1 month and 2 weeks. But basically, the gist of it is that see the issue with Thailand that's kind of it's like I was always doing like I thought I'd stop at one point, then I'm like, oh wait, I'm gonna go do this and add on to it. And the thing with that, it sort of just sort of ballooned into eventually supporting SC80 synths and then up to Roland VA76. And then I was like, why not emulate certain modes of it that aren't exact like why not go above and beyond? And that's what I did. And then like, why not make my lazier patch editions less lazy? And it sort of just turned into a ongoing spiral of hey, what we're gonna do with this, and then it turned into a big spectacle. And what happened was, and so, I've always felt like I'm sort of a prisoner to my own projects. And that's the thing that's a bit unfortunate is that, you know, it's a very challenging work. I know some people on musical artifacts say it isn't, but the download count speaks for itself. But really, the issue, and I'm not saying that it's like, that I'm the most manual of work on this, but it's more, I just know, I just know my way around enough to do things. But so, and the most recent updates that we're doing was making the XG sound effects uh, copy the sound effects on the Yamaha MU2000 EX, which was fun. And I learned that there was a key issue, but I did keep it was a big circus, but I had to do it to avoid problems because I wanted to do parody. And now, mind you, on the XG synth, on like the MU2000, the siren sound is a police siren, but on the Tyros sound effects, it's an air raid siren, which actually makes a very hilarious thing. Yeah, most of my sound fonts are huge. Like they're all like 1 GB for like some of my more newer stuff, but one sound make of mine is literally 4 gigs and barely works on anything. So, well, I don't mean barely works on anything. But it's more people had to update their player code because of it in the first place because it was so. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's unoptimized, and I mean, when I had a Mac many years ago, the storage space on it was absolutely bad, and that's how I destroyed my second Mac, was overfilling its hard drive. In fact, I find that the only drive size I can use nowadays, or have been able to use ever since 2016, is 2 TB or higher. 1 TB and certainly 500 gigabytes are absolutely unusable for a main computer. And well, good luck with at least I didn't have to pay out of pocket for the SSD that was used to warranty this computer I'm on right now. It's running on a replacement SSD from the manufacturer because someone at Samsung dropped the ball, and I had to get a Micron drive put in there by Lenovo themselves. I didn't have to pay for it, but I was out of computer for a whole month. Yeah, and Logic Pro. I mean, I got say as much as I am, I'm a fan of old Apple, but in general, I use Windows and Linux, but I still have a Mac for some very niche purposes. But I'll say what I will about Macs, but Logic Pro's Alchemy is absolutely amazing. I just wish I could actually do something with it, like because I'm not very good at, I mean, I can like, I use my Jumbox sound font I fed it into Alchemy to make as like oscillators instead of square or saw wave to make really cool FM patches, and it works. It's just so it's like recursive FM, and it's absolutely glorious. Yeah, it's on Itch. My itch.io has Tyroland's latest version there as well. Unfortunately, Musical Artifacts has a bug where they're not honoring anything over 100 megs because of Cloudflare recently being silly, and they haven't switched to Anubis yet. So basically, yeah, my itch.io also has the ability to donate on there. Tyroland does not have donations though because I don't think I legally can do that because it is, Roland and Yamaha samples. Selling that would be a problem. But the Jumbox sound font is Libre and is also GPL compatible. So you could use it in a Linux distro if but you probably want to do that for the gaming focused Linux distros. But you know, and I have tested both sound fonts against Logic. Now, I find that Logic has a very hard limit of 1 gig, which, you know, the format supports 4 and with hacks 8. And if you kind of reinterpret the spec, you can go higher, but it's kind of a bit of a silly thing. Yeah, well, the idea behind the sound font is, it was someone else's joke project that they used to make that I fixed it heavily, but they made it so they could use Jumbox sounds and beatbox sounds in FL Studio now, which is cool and all, and I fully support that. It's just, and even though it's like one of the things I've targeted most of game developers, the amount of people who said they use it exists. The people who actually have used it is like nobody, which is unfortunate. But you know, but yeah, like I find the actual interface of the actual program clunky. Mind you, the only DAW I'm actually good. I'm comfortable with the sound trap, but I think my first song I wrote in it was a tough act to follow because even though on my third song with it, I like the second song sort of just didn't like flow as well. The third song sort of went well, and I put a lot of effort into it, but the chiptune version kind of fell really short, and I'm not happy about that. So I guess the 5 minute song that's basically the 5 minute song I wrote seems to be like the channel trailer is actually really good, but unfortunately, I it just kind of turned into a big mess. And what things we're doing were not like I and and not to mention another thing I had that I discussed earlier in the stream that there was some unforeseen circumstances, and I forgot to mention that I also had a data breach, but that's I'm not going to go into detail about that because I don't want people looking stuff up, but basically there was a data breach involving financial stuff. That's all I'll say. Though they also got some other information I'm not going to go into, but it could have been worse, but it could have been so much better. Apparently, the scammers tried to buy a World Cup ticket on my debit card, but I fixed that situation before it happened. But that was not a fun phone call to the bank I had to make. But ultimately, I got it back sorted out just before my Soundtrap subscription and VRChat Plus expired. But I it's hard to use sound like I'm not. I'm not sure if my like it, I have so many song melodies in my head, but my ability with pitch is kind of bad. When I've tuned sound fonts, it's never been fun. Like, and the funny thing is, like, I make sound fonts, and even though, like, like I'm sort of a sound font maker in a VST world, but well, I do things. I do what I do because I get bored easily, and well, there's a lot of angles to that, and the thing with Mac, like, and I'll just say that I remember how hard it was to get Mac versions back when I was raised in an all Apple household, so getting out of the Mac ecosystem, while a good thing for me, was also hard fought, and my time on a Mac was spent like installing Wine and even Parallels at one point when I had enough drive space, which didn't really last for very long. Had to delete the whole VM around the time I started playing Minecraft on the PC that started on. Which ironically, that PC visited the dream world and it did a bunch of things in Pokemon that are cool. But you know, I I made my I enjoyed the Mac eye candy, but I'm not gonna say that I actually. I wished I had been on Windows and Android as my first devices. Yeah, and Parallels, and let it be said that getting Parallels working when I was 9 back in 2011 was an experience. Let me just put it that way. But it's not like, I've had a lot of, I'm good with computers, but computers do not like me. And unfortunately, it's turned into a big saga of, hey, this device should or doesn't do this, and it becomes an utter mess. And I don't like how it works. It's just kind of computers are like especially considering like I got all the effort of getting software or whatever, and then, well, there's always a caveat or whatever to it, or sometimes it's like it won't do what I want it to do. It's just coding is not for the faint of heart. And I mean, like, music stuff and sound mods are not my only hobby. I mean, I've made typefaces before, but I've also done a web app, a game. Well, a game if we consider if it's a toy game, but it's kind of what I do is a bit. What I do is kind of. I don't really have a set interest. My only interest is tech and no further specification. So basically, I just do what I think is interesting, even if it, but yeah, if RAM is a concern, my sound fonts, barring a select few, probably aren't the best because, you know, even essentially drive state's an issue. But mind you, when I was in my youth, also I had horrible bandwidth, like 2 megabits per second internet connection speed. So the problem with that is that I had very bad internet, and the problem with that was that, like, I could only play Minecraft on a 10-player server, and, well, I have so many interests that it makes even 1 terabyte drives unusable, even as far back as 2016 when data wasn't entirely, when games weren't even AAA back then. But I never played AAA games. I ran stuff like, Valve games at their most demanding, and these days VR chat. But even that isn't really demanding, especially if people are using Quest avatars. But I don't use a headset. And yes, this model I use is my VR chat avatar. But yeah, so the thing with sound fonts is I always go for single bank sound fonts. And yes, XG can do that if you're clever, but the thing with that is that, Logic kind of sort of interprets single bank sound fonts a little weirdly, and you need certain player plugins, or the sampler plugin works better with that. Though my experience with Logic is limited because the few times I got to use it were during 2 classes in 2023, and that's kind of it. And I I also found that DLS Music Device and Sampler both have horrible issues with file size. Like, they have the limits old FL had, and unfortunately, you know, mind you, I had GarageBand on an eMac running Panther, so it's kind of, that's its own circus and a half. But like, GarageBand is, I've used it sometimes, and I have done interesting things with it, but it's been a while, and I think I mean, only like a few of the things I did in GarageBand ever worked out well. But you know, it wasn't like I didn't like I in both Soundtrap and GarageBand, what I would do is fuse a bunch of loops and see what happens, and but yeah, I got to the limit. I Of course, that song probably would clip on today's speakers, but yeah, it was 2013, and I still have the thumb drive somewhere. I might have to look for it. Not that I have a Mac. I'd have to, borrow a Mac to open it, and I do have an MP3 of it though, but not on me at the moment. But yeah, the Jumpbox Soundfont basically would sort of replaces 8-Bit Legends from Logic if you're not using Logic. But, you know, I don't care if Apple takes me up on that offer. Now, for something like Tireland, it's freeware and it can only be freeware. So no, as much as I want, so like as much as there are things I want to, I like if I, in my will, if I could, but I can't, I would release everything I've ever made as public domain. But unfortunately, I can't do that because, you know, some of it is, derivative of stuff I don't have the rights to public domain, if that makes any sense. So it, it's, you know, it is what it is. And also, I've, I know a lot about the Apple world, but more of the Intel era Apple world, and also some PowerPC. But in general, PowerPC Macs for me. Like I'm always interested when people do DIY stuff on PowerPC Macs, and for that matter, anything that Windows G Electronics or Snoopy Tech does with a white iMac, like a small version of the one I own, is also hilarious. But you know, in the grand scheme of things, don't. I still have a use for Macs occasionally because one developer tool Apple has, which I have the only Intel copy of, called FTX Number Fuser, can fully transplant font types. Like it can totally transplant font tables from one font to another without rebuilding it, which is like something that no other tool can do in the font landscape. So for that reason, I'm using an Intel Mac just for this one purpose because its browsers don't work anymore, and that's unfortunate. But yeah, and I don't have perfect pitch. In fact, I find that in some of my times when I manually tune stuff, it's the guesstimation and brute forcing. And even then, sometimes I'm just like, I go for the least crappy option, which is kind of unfortunate. But, I did take piano lessons years ago, but like, I just have so much trouble associating with it. So like I don't really make songs and I make things for trackers, but I don't actually track at all. My song involving OpenMPT, they all use MIDI imported into it, but also and then I do other things. And sometimes it's the case where the only thing I own is the samples, which is kind of funny, but you know, the other thing that kind of trips me up with piano rolls, and for that matter, the thing that trips me up for trackers is that I most likely have dyslexia because, like, a lot of times when I'm reading a book, my eyes will jump up a line or something, and I can't keep my math column straight, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, it's kind of hard to do stuff like like I have several hardware synths, but they're really only used for playback. Or because I always struggle with precision sampling something. So like I have a bunch of so like I have stuff where it's like the only synthesis I really do is like additive or and I'm good at making instruments, not songs, with one exception basically. But well, and for the longest time, I made instruments for musicians without actually being a songwriter for like up until 2021. So, you know, but it's not the only example of me contributing to communities I have nothing to do with. I just get bored a lot and I do what I think I can do. Like, I once made a, I ended up, even though I'm not a tabletop role playing game person, nor am I a person who currently practices the occult. I made, after years of work, a 120 sided dice that has tarot cards and a Ouija board as its numbering. Even though I am not a D&D player and I don't do any readings, not out of reasoning, it's just more I'm not able to at the moment. And even then, I don't buy into some of and I don't buy into the more kooky parts of that. But you know, I but Megalovania it's nice and all, and I think it's Toby Fox is a great composer, and I have ironically I in terms of some of the things I do, I have found what he does to be good ideas, like including Easter eggs designed intentionally to you know notify the people who for a living data mine games. And on top, like he likes sort of toying with them. And then Toby Fox also, now does the Pokemon stuff. Even though I swore off Pokemon when the Switch titles hit, but I still like the music, so Toby Fox. And I've never actually played any Toby Fox games. I have friends who have, but I've never played them, even when they were brand new. Like, but I'll tell you this, and I have similar, feelings as Toby Fox does when it comes to all the Spamton does. It's kind of funny, but in truth, a lot of the issues are that I just get bored easily, and like I've, you know, like there's a lot of things I do where I do them because I get bored, but I don't do them because like I just I'm always looking for something to do. And Herpa Derpa, if I do it, it's kind of it just seems interesting and it seems possible. And so it's like I sort of think like an engineer, but I'm also sort of bored a lot. Though I just and all the things I do creatively have absolutely nothing to do with my career path at all. Like literally nothing to do with it. It's just like everything I do is I do it because it just feels like I can do it. Even if some people would say maybe it's best not done, or that it would be pointless, or that it wouldn't work. I just want to try my hand at it anyways, unless there's no way I can see it working. But then there's times where I've done things that I expect will fail, but I have to see just in case. So it's kind of interesting how that works. I mean, I feel like Tyroland sounds really good. For the format that it is in, it is absolutely fantastic. Because as someone who is literally trying to extend the SF2 specification, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. So in terms of yeah, because I don't I don't exactly create too many things from scratch. I sort of enhance existing stuff and or do total conversions. But so like all my code is forks, for instance. But the thing that's important to keep in mind here is that my code is kind of, it's not elegant code and it was hard to get working in the first place, but code is code. But the gist of it is that the Tyroland is intended for, playback really. I mean, like it's you can or production really, but at the same time it's like the SF2 format is a very limited format. You only get low pass filters. You only get a triangle type spine LFO shape. You don't have, no FM unless you do some really kooky stuff with that. You don't have any you don't have round robins without tricks on a player side level. You don't have you need tricks to get Yamaha XG working. You don't have any too crazy effects. You don't have a lot of you don't like you have like you don't even have a humanizer. Like there's a lot of things that they for effects have to be done externally with that stuff too. And if you're on mobile or you're on a Linux, like Linux, or you're on a BSD or God forbid Herd, that's all kind of like your best bet is LADSPA plugins, but even that probably isn't enough. Like so, SF2 is like it's a format that's like it is well suited to doing retro format to retro songs, but the reason people don't really use it for anything but that anymore is because it has limits. But I sort of didn't get to know because like the reason and I agree that's sort of the market. I am trying to get someone like Toby Fox to do something with me, do something already. like the thing of it is like I like my sound fonts are crisp. Like a lot of the problems with smaller sound fonts is that they just sort of sound tinny. But in theory, mine would work for that. Like the Jumbox sound font would work great in Toby Fox game, and Thailand would work well in something that's trying to be, you know, like CD Red Book audio for whatever game uses that. But I would say that, Tyroland sort of like pushes the limits, though it's not even used, like it has modulators on the instrument generators, but not the preset ones. Because I've had a lot of trouble with SF2 modulators, because Polyphone's UI is junk, and especially the synth is hard to navigate as a Polyphone user. So like, well, especially font actually, but even then I like when player developers asked me to do a whole port of Tyroland to the format I've just standardized, but like, I'm like, the amount of work it would take to do that when I'm on a very tight deadline is kind of, well, it's more of a case of the idea to extend SF2, as much as I had the idea, I wasn't really doing enough granular edits to warrant for me to need to do so. It was a friend of mine who wanted to make a whole new format from the ground up. But then we looked at the specs some more and realized that we had some openings we could, use, and we did. Well, it's great that we did that because apparently there's a section 11 of the sound font spec or section 9 of the SFE spec. It covers Silicon sound fonts, which basically is the sound font developer's official way of making sound fonts on synth hardware, which could be anything from, a Rompler, even cartridges. And yes, it can do most of these. You can have straight up cartridges, and you can also interleave the chips as well. But like they even had it where you could have another sound font load this. Hypothetically, don't think they ever intended that, but you can do it. Similar to getting 8-bit samples out of it, or via using 24-bit without the 16-bit bottom chunk, or using the 8 gig mode, or using RIF64. Like basically, they never expected that the creative was just loosely defining their standard, so you could sort of have fun with it. But yeah, and the loosest part of the standard is silicon mode, where there was some disagreement on how to implement it. I just sort of went for the one that made the most sense and was the easiest to do and the most compatible. And I did some guesstimation. I even got the unused parameters done just because I could. But the idea being is I want to have a Jumbox on a chip and make the first new FM chip since 2021, which would be, or 2011 was when the chip was introduced, but it was killed off in 2021. So make a new chip and see how that goes. And don't worry about what I said earlier. I don't have enough subs for monetization, so there you go. So I mean, and even then, like, I'm not monetizing a video that started off about some pretty bad things going on with my heart is not something I want to do. Anyhow, the issue is that, I've wanted people to use my content in games. Like even my web app that I wrote would make a great retro game password system for an indie game. Like I've made all the ingredients needed to build a game, and I've even tried my hand at game dev a few times. I even took classes on it, but like, I think I'm much better at making game assets than games. Like how I'm better at making instruments than songs, which is kind of funny. It's like how voice actors who it's like the example of voice actors who in real life don't look very they don't look like they'd be hired by Hollywood, but are great at voice acting. And I even wanted to do some of that because I because I am like the one VTuber who's also a UTOW at the same time, though that also was kind of it didn't really work that well. But even trying to use uh, differential methods where like diff singer didn't really work either. I mean, but I have the ingredients for someone else to do it. My issue was my setup on the PC was being silly, and I don't have a drive account with enough empty space. So there you go. So I couldn't do a collab with it. But but according to UTOW, the range I got was B2 to A sharp 5, which means really good range if I could actually sing in real life, which I can only like my skills with it are mediocre. Like part of it is I think it's more that I can't hold something for that long. Like running out of air, which it's interesting because I'm related to two asthmatics in my immediate family, but I don't exercise because when I do, my lungs burn. So maybe I am the third asthmatic, but I need to get tested for that. But maybe that's why I can't sing is that I just don't have the air to. Also, I live in a high elevation, but that's another factor. So basically, like I'm a Utahloid and a VTuber, which is like so anyone wanting to draw art of that would have a very fun time with the descriptors section. But it's for so like and understand that what I do is always I just get bored easily and I toy around and see what happens. But and I hope that my things that I actually go places for what I've made. Ideally, before I actually have to start looking for work, but like actually have to start looking for work. But you know, I just need to do a lot of things, and you know, keep me grounded. I gotta do things, but well, also just so you know, it's 4:30 in the morning, and my my some people I'm living with wake up at 5 a.m. So it's so I'm on pretty much every platform for those not in the know, and well, I just get bored easily. It's but I'll keep working on sound fonts, keep working on whatever. I will have to make Unifont EX work though soon-ish. I might just wait, and I was going to do it in August, but I had bigger problems, and also you know I kind of need to get my other PC, like some of the code for it is on the other PC. Well, I import that over to WSL, but it would just be a nightmare and a half to do. And even when I did it last year for that update, I had to do it in a staggered release of where the least common formats come later. Also, in the time since the previous update, I might have the same data, but I changed OSs. Well, not OSs, but I changed Windows installs, meaning like I just copied a user folder from my PC to another, but like the program files folder, like put simply, what ended up happening was that computer it still exists, but it had its OS refreshed but keeping data, so I couldn't really. So that computer kind of became out of commission, and that kind of was a circus. But so I have to sort of get back what I lost to even start the update. Well, like, I can start it elsewhere, but then I kind of have to, and then I have one other computer where it's the only version that can make the node file, and that machine is kind of unstable. Also, it's the only machine the that can compress the PNG really well because of Zopfli reasons. So that's a circus. And then so a lot of work to do, and it's probably going to be a it happens when it happens type of situation. And I'll like Samsung and dance as usual. Now, what I'm going to find a bit interesting is that when I have to do the Unicode 18 version and maybe the Unicode 19 version, depends on how Unicode 18 is. Well, I'll already be employed at that point, ideally. So I don't know how that's going to work with my schedule, but well, we'll see about that. For context, the sector I'm going into is, well, I want to do technical writing, but at this point, cybersecurity is looking like it might be the only option left, given the bots and toasters are taking over and all that. Or so they say. Then again, when even the platforms are declaring war on the toasters, And when the toasters themselves are shutting down their own services, it's probably a sinking ship anyways. So, well, these are things you can't run locally, but there you go. It's more, we'll see how the market looks when I'm actually out of uni next year. But, and I can't put any of this on my resume because I've been online for such a long time. And so such a long time, like it even includes some rather, you know, I was very cringe as in my youth, but there you go. It was just a circus. I was cringe in my youth, and well, not in a bad way, but I was just kind of silly about that. But seeing as, I made my fair share of mistakes, but at the heart of it, I'm still you know, I was cringe when in my youth, but I still made some, but I tried to do the right thing. But because of that, though, the cringe, however, and the fact that I'm looking at a bit heated about things I detest, and I probably like to then about a story, would imply that basically, I'd have to keep my online life and my resume and LinkedIn separate forever. Even if I've made things that would actually look good on a resume, I can't like actually link them. Or so it is what it is. But seeing as we are at 4:35 a.m., my family wakes up at 5. I think it's probably a good time to call it quits now. So, stay safe and happy with with the gaming industry now. Actually, no, Sony makes mistakes. But at this point, I hacked the C418 based on my Minecraft skin and the song I wrote, and I'm practically Sega, given that I've done Yamaha stuff and all that things. Like this VTuber is like a lot like Miku, so there you go. Anyhow, and I even tried making an advanced version of this model, but knowing what I know now, it wouldn't look good on screen. So, I made the good choice using this model today. So ultimately, all of you should have a wonderful day as I get ready to go to bed. Anyways, see y'all later and stay safe. Best wishes to everyone who enjoys my content.